Okay, that gets us to our next item on the agenda, the fire department vehicle request, and I see Chief Rowland is here, and Bill Bird, who's chairman of the fire commission. Floor is yours. Yep.
Okay. What we did is we came up with our capital budget. We didn't plan on having a vehicle go down or having a problem with a vehicle. In the last few months, we've put in $3,000 into a 7-year-old Excursion, which is the chief's vehicle. We brought it to the commission last month. We wanted to bring it to you to say that we need to replace it rather than dumping good money into a seven-year-old vehicle, which we've already put 3 into it. We could put another 4 or 5 into it. There's no guarantee that it's going to be where we need it to be. So what we've done is it's an 05 Excursion. It's already 7 years old. Usually we keep a vehicle like that for anywhere between 7 to 10 years, so we're already at the end of its life here. So what we're looking for is to go into a new vehicle, which the vehicle right now, it's unsafe when you're driving on the highway or you're going to a call. The truck shimmies and shakes all over. There's front end problems where a lot of guys are really worried about even driving the vehicle around. So what the association decided to do last night was they actually want to do a purchase with the town, and they're willing to fund half of what the vehicle is worth. So basically what we're here is we're only here for half of what the vehicle would be, and that would carry us for another 7 to 10 years. The vehicle before this was a Suburban, which lasted us 10 years before, and we ended up dumping about $10,000 to $12,000 into it before we were instructed not to put any more money into the vehicle, and we actually went out and purchased the vehicle right then and there because just physically it didn't make sense to keep dumping money into a vehicle that was already at the end of its life. So we're at that point again where we're already dumped $3,000 into it, and we would have to dump more money into it, and at this point it would make sense to move forward. So the commission's on board with it, and like I said, the volunteer fire department, towards fund drive and other fundraisers that we do, is willing to step up and donate half of the vehicle so it doesn't burden the town with the whole expense since it wasn't even anticipated. So it's a good gesture back from the volunteer association back to the town. So a new vehicle, we're looking anywhere between around 40 to 43,000. We would trade the other vehicle in, and we got some pricing back anywhere between $10,000 and $12,000. We get in for a trade-in on the vehicle, so the number would drop to probably about 32, 33, 34,000 in that area. But what we would have to do is we'd have to relocate, take the light bar off, take the switches out, take the radios out, and move them into the other vehicle, along with the tray and everything else. So we're probably talking, when we get said and done, we're probably talking 40, 42,000. So basically what we're looking for you to do is to authorize not to exceed $20,000 so we can go out and purchase a vehicle, and we're gonna try to buy it off a state bid. And there's a possibility we might be able to get, there might be a couple 11s left over, so we don't have to go into a 12, and we could actually save some more money on top of that. So what I'm basically looking for, and what the commission's looking for, is a number not to exceed $20,000, and we could go out and purchase this now.
Doing it now.
Yes. This is something we cannot wait until July with.
Sure.
Oh, what, just remind me, was this vehicle in your capital improvement plan? I think it was, and for what year was it?
It was not in our capital
Oh, you
improvement plan.
didn't have it on?
No, what our capital improvement, it's been funny over the last few years, years ago, the volunteer association used to purchase the vehicle just like we're doing now. Usually when we put what we put into capital improvement, and it's my fault because I'm kind of new at this, we've really never put in a vehicle, like a chief's vehicle or an expedition or something like that, because when we put into our capital, is we're talking $500,000 fire trucks plus. So those are our big ticket items. I mean, $40,000 vehicle should be in it, but it's really, we usually try to get as much as we can get out of the vehicle before we have to replace it, but we didn't figure on that in our capital budget.
Okay, and you said something happened to it? Did something
The
specific
front
happen?
end, nothing specifically happened with it, but
It's
the
just
front
started
end,
shimming?
it's really unsafe to drive. If you're driving on the highway, the car, you really have to hold it with both hands.
And the $4,000 repair would be for?
$3,000.
$3,000 repair.
Yep, that we've already
would
done.
be- No, you said it would cost you another $4,000.
It would probably cost us anywhere between $3,000 and $5,000 more, and at that point, we're not even guaranteed that's gonna fix the problem, because
Well, what's the problem? That's what I'm trying to get.
we can't, we'd have to rebuild the entire front end, and the problem is, once you start, you don't know where the end is gonna be.
We've had 2 people look at it.
And what did they say?
They said we
They
need
charged
to, they've charged us $3,000, and they've recommended that we need to replace it soon. They can keep taking it back and keep fixing it, but it's gonna keep costing us more money until we can figure out what actually is going on with it. But this is something we need to do, which we didn't anticipate doing.
How old are the brakes?
The brakes,
When's the
year and a
last
half
time-
old.
When's the last time you put tires on it?
Tires are,
I mean, I know when my car shimmies, I know
2
why
years
it's
old.
shimming. Okay. So
You're
it's not
talking
the-
about a vehicle that runs
It's not the brakes, it's not
majority
the
of the time.
tires, so it's something else?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments? So this would have to be funded out of contingency,
Correct.
which we don't have a transfer here tonight
I'd have to-
prepared, but that could be done.
Yeah.
But the other part of this is that if we were to go along with this, the Board of Finance does not meet again until January. So, that's the earliest, if we were to go along with, that's the earliest they could act on it. Does that
If
affect?
it's from contingency. So you'd have to, you have to at least get the paperwork together and get all the details together in terms of the actual price and all that. But that's the next time they meet. If it's a contingency transfer, they have to be involved.
Do they meet after our January meeting?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
We meet on January 11, they probably meet on the 19th or something like that, I don't know.
So
the
this
exact
couldn't
date.
happen no matter what until January 19th?
From the Board of Finance standpoint, that's
If we
correct.
approve, and,
That's right.
and the
That's
process
next
is we
So
have to
that- that's
approve it,
the
and then they
timeframe.
do, so.
It's just a lot going on. We might be able to get a good deal on a leftover 11, and just don't know what's gonna be available come, if we wait until the end of January before we act on it. I mean, we're ready to act on it across the street. It's really based on
When's the next meeting of the association?
the
And what I'm getting at,
end of
the-
January now.
Would the association be willing to consider acting on this with an idea that there is reimbursement
Sure,
pending?
absolutely. I just basically need the commitment from you, and if you need to go through the process and this and that, we can do that, as long as,
Well, there's no guarantee that the Board of Finance, I mean, we can approve it, it doesn't mean that it's a done deal, right?
There's no guarantee, that's
Right.
correct.
Guarantee,
Yeah.
yeah.
Given the presentation made tonight. So, I mean, to get the process moving, I entertain a motion to approve the Volunteer Fire Association for the chief from pursuing the state bid on the chief's vehicle as described, and authorizing a transfer of not to exceed $20,000 from contingency. Is that
I'll
what
make
you-
that motion.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Passes unanimously. Then the next step will be to refer this to the Board of Finance for action.
okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The next item is the Country Club of Woodbridge Building Capital Assessment, and David Stein is here to make an executive summary of this. You have in your packet his draft capital needs assessment dated December 13, 2011.
How are you?
Turn into concrete.
Okay, we're all set?
Great, well, good evening, thank you. For the record, my name is David Stein. I'm a principal and project architect with the architectural and engineering firm of Silver, Petroselli and Associates. Our firm's located at 3190 Whitney Avenue in Hamden. Good to be back. Haven't been at this table in a while, so it's nice to be back to be in front of you. We, in the last, I'd say about 6 weeks ago, we were asked to do a capital needs assessment for the country club. And when approached by Mr. Genovese, I immediately relayed to him that a year ago we did this exact same exercise for the town of Manchester. They were in a similar position in which they were looking at finding individuals to help manage their parcel or their property, which at one time was also a private entity. So we were very familiar with the process, and we used and we had a format in place. So when Tony asked if we were able to do this in a relatively short period of time, we were confident that we could do it because we had a template in place. And that document served well for the town of Manchester as they proceeded along with their overall capital needs assessment. What we did as our team of architects and engineers, all our engineering disciplines are in-house, so we looked at from the building per se, looking at the architectural envelope, but also looking at the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, and so forth. Our review was limited to really the buildings itself. Obviously, we traveled through the grounds, but didn't pay much attention to the overall course and such. So really the context of our work were the buildings itself. What I handed out to you was an aerial just so we all could look in terms of the context of where all the buildings are related to on the site. We didn't look at the snack bar, which is located, at least in your map, at the top left, which I believe is the northwest portion of the parcel. But we really addressed all the other structures that were in place and so forth. We made various visits over time. Your facility staff walked us through and got us to almost every space that we were able to do. Your building department was extremely helpful, and you guys have pretty much every documentation of plans and specifications available on the building, so it really gave us a good roadmap to understand the history of the building and so forth. Just to reiterate for yourself and the public, the building was built in, I believe, in 1966 as a single structure, about a 43,000 square foot structure. It's primarily a timbered structure, shingled roof, wood siding, wood windows, concrete foundations built into a portion of the earth and the topography. We didn't perform any structural analysis, but from our visual inspections, the structure itself is in fair shape. We didn't see major settlement, we didn't see major cracking. So the building is held up well. I think it has to do with the slope roofs and such, so weather, it deals with the weather. But some of the signs that we immediately saw, and I provided you with an executive summary just to try to hit some bullet points of the major items that are within this report, and jump in at any time if I miss anything. So some of the major items that we immediately saw as we started out first looking at the envelope is the clubhouse roof shingles need to be replaced. We just need to look at a different way of dealing with venting and such. Technology has changed, especially since this was put on. The roof has had replacement since 1966, but I think it was just a tear and a replacement. So further detailing and investigation of what the underlayment is, but we didn't see major signs of infiltration that's resulting in structural sediment. We clearly see leaks. There's leaks within various areas of the building, but nothing that has caused structural rot. The siding, the wood siding is showing the similar signs, and that concerns us. That usually works itself into the building cavity, saturates insulation, could cause mold, and other deterioration. So we really need to investigate some repairs. We're not necessarily recommending a full replacement of the siding, but in the long term, I think if you did a life cycle analysis of that, you'd be determined that you're going to be just chasing those areas after time. But definitely some repair and replacement, and that's going to involve some investigative type of work there. Building built in 1966, you're just dealing with the ADA and handicap accessibility issues throughout, and just kind of the code compliant issues of means of egress and such. So we saw that from entering into the parking lot. Your parking lot and your handicap parking is not contiguous or directly connected to your main entryway, so that's a concern. The topography itself is a bit too aggressive to actually get from those handicap spaces to your main entry of your building, and your main entry of your building has an entire flight of stairs to get to. So to come around the side to an elevator is it's not the best deal. If we were building a brand new building, we'd obviously tie those all in together and not create a discriminatory entryway just for the disabled. But code allows that to take place, and we could, in future analysis, could determine the best place for that. I'm continuing on with just some of the architectural elements. In terms of the parking lot, it shows enormous signs of wear. It has not been maintained or resurfaced in some years. We anticipate that wear layer cannot just simply be milled, that you would most likely have to do a full replacement of the parking lot and most likely the sub-base. So we would recommend that further analysis of your overall drainage would be contemplated. Our guess would be that, we would anticipate that some of the drainage system would have to be reworked or just re-networked and determine where that storm drainage is being dissipated. And making sure that you're truly capturing that into storm drainage and not sending that off to adjacent property. So a further engineering analysis needs to be done on that. But from our visual inspection, we're concerned with the overall parking lot. Moving on to some other areas that we saw some clear violations just with the kitchen itself, but those are more equipment related items that just need to be addressed, and that could be with one-to-one replacement. But that's not a major, and these items aren't necessarily in the highest priority. In our report, you're gonna see we gave a matrix and a priority assessment. The major priorities that we're seeing is the envelope of the building. Obviously, major code compliant issues are there. The maintenance issues and the aesthetic issues, those are last in our improvement. The windows, some of the windows show serious rotting. You can see daylight in some of the areas, mainly on the north side, in the large catering hall. There's a few windows that really need to be replaced. A full replacement of the windows I don't think are necessary, but if you do entertain replacing the siding, I think you're gonna look at how the windows are flashed, and usually those things kind of all go hand in hand because they're part of the overall envelope. There is a benefit of, if you are replacing windows, you'd obviously be doing windows that are more energy efficient than the single pane windows that are there. But the majority of the windows are still stable, and they provide the function that you need. Through our study, we didn't do a full code analysis, but we did see that some of those egress paths, either internally or just around the perimeter of that, just needed to be addressed to make sure there weren't tripping hazards, to make sure that the door hardware is in its full compliance, and so forth. So there's things that can be done and staggered over time, but I think you'll need to pay attention to those going forward. The outbuildings in general, as they're usually outbuildings, just don't get maintained as the same as your front of house type of building. So upgrades to either roof replacement and siding repairs and gutters and drainage, those need to get addressed, and they're detailed in your overall report. Moving on to really the bones or the infrastructure of the building, the mechanical systems. You are working off of we believe your original boiler that's there. There's been replacement and repairs of burners and such over time. There wasn't any tags on that, but just from our visual inspection, from what we understand, you guys have been working with that, and the previous management group has been working with that for some long time. So just in the long run, we'd really recommend the boilers pass its useful life, and that in the long run, the investment of providing a new boiler would clearly pay for itself in the long run, just with its overall energy efficiency. One of the major non-code compliant issues is just the combustion air supply that comes into that boiler system. It's a very awkward or unique way in which it's currently being distributed. And that's important. It's important for just the performance, but there's also, with that combustion, you're just concerned with carbon monoxide and such. So that should really be addressed as an improvement. The hot water distribution piping also is showing serious signs in terms of its fittings, scalings, and such. So we would be recommending replacement of all of that. Just a point to note, as I'm mentioning the mechanical systems, and even with the architectural systems, our scope did not include a hazardous material study or assessment. We're not environmental engineers, but that's something that any of these projects would need to have some additional studies just to make sure that we're not dealing with asbestos or lead with any of that type of remediation.
Did your I only read a couple pages of maybe a draft, but did it mention asbestos around some of the pipes?
Well, we could visually see that we anticipate that that's there, but it's really out of our purview as architects and engineers to make that determination. We've been around the block enough to anticipate that you're going to be dealing with some of that in there, but we haven't made any quantification of that. That's really out of the scope of our of our responsibility as architects. You're going to be dealing with it somewhere, that's for sure. Let's see. Some of the air handler units throughout your building, there's various units that deal with the overall space. It's not a central chiller plant that deals with 43,000 square feet. So that's good news, is that you could tackle these as individual units. And it's a bit more efficient too when you're dealing with individual zoning control. So some of them are new, you've done some replacement over time. But there are some, there's actually 3 units serving the upper level that are not working. I think you've been battling those this past year. And we clearly saw that through your trending information. You have a building management system that controls these units, and so it provides us with kind of the health of that unit, and we were able to see that just even from the trending information that's on your computer system. So we would recommend that. It's not a full replacement of the entire system, but you want to deal with those individual units. On the electrical side, at this point, we're assuming that those emergency lighting and egress lighting is not fully functional. The devices are in place, but we didn't perform a full test. Typically, that's done with your fire marshal to determine whether or not those are active. But a building of this size, you typically are doing a replacement of your emergency systems. You're upgrading this so you're not dealing with just battery backup. You're tying it in more modern systems that just provide you with more reliability for an emergency. So we would definitely recommend that that would be looked at on an individual basis, and I think your fire marshal is able to go through and do a test and determine whether or not some of those need to be replaced. Same thing with the fire alarm system itself, which would be an addressable system to notify the fire department and such. Currently, that's a non-compliant system. It works, but if you're looking at a long-range plan, it's a good investment to replace that overall system. More on a long-term approach is just to eliminate some of the lighting and replace with energy-efficient systems. Some of those fixtures, some of this could simply be just relamping and putting in more energy-efficient bulbs. But if this is if you are looking for a long-term capital need, I think over time you can begin to replace some of those old and dated lighting fixtures. So it'll clearly pay for itself in the long run. The electrical service itself is really, we consider it at the end of its useful life. They're difficult to maintain. It's mainly from a safety perspective of how you're able to turn off the system and turn it back on and re-energize it and such. So modern systems just have better technology and better safety procedures to protect not only the people that will be maintaining it, but also your end systems that you're tying into, such as surge protection and such. And site lighting. Site lighting was a challenge for us. We actually weren't out there at night to determine that. But with possible parking reconfiguration, my guess is that parking lot lighting just needs to be relooked at. You're looking at light pollution levels and such. So you're going to want to do a further analysis of your overall lighting, seeing whether or not there's motion sensors or timing that can be integrated into that, because you just don't have that on a building of this era. So that gives you an overall sense of the systems that we looked at and really the major components that we're looking at. We did also, just to conclude, we did also want to do just a very quick evaluation, because in our analysis we didn't do a full tally. We didn't feel it was appropriate. And we didn't do that for Manchester either. We didn't say, well, all of these are going to cost you this, because we understand that this isn't a project that you're starting today. This is something that you're going to plan over time. And this document is going to help you with your priorities, so forth. But as you're dealing with a 43,000 square foot building, and Manchester was a much smaller structure, they asked us the same question, is it really worth it for us to start investing in a building like this? Do we need a building of this size? Is the needs of a building, a public building like this, appropriate? And a needs study and a program study has to come out of this. But just for discussion purposes, we really looked at, okay, well, what would be the cost if you were going to demolish this building and maybe build one of half the size? Because we see the lower level that has locker rooms for, you know, an enormous amount of individuals, would you really need that? And those are some of the things that begin to get downsized, and we see that across the board on a lot of the community or the public courses as the facilities lower. So in our report, we did look at a building that would, you know, to demolish the building and to kind of reconfigure some of the site work. We said, you know, you could spend easily $400,000 to $500,000 just to demolish the building and reconfigure, potentially reposition where that would need to be, and to build half the size of a building. So we're talking a 20,000 square foot building. You know, you're talking somewhere between a $5.5 and, you know, $6 million building to redo that. You could add up the numbers that we have. I don't think that you're going to be getting to, you're not going to be getting towards a $5.5 to $6.5 million building, but it's worth just having that conversation to compare what you're up against. The building is a 1966 building that's been modernized over time. The locker rooms were done in the 50s, so, and the finishes are in pretty good shape. It's been well maintained. The envelope needs to be improved. It hasn't, you know, it's been maintained over time, but the envelope needs to be improved. The parking lot needs to be fixed, and your mechanical systems need to be upgraded for it to kind of move on to that next cycle. And I think the good thing is you're going to see a vast improvement. Your return on your investment with energy efficient systems is going to pay for itself easily within a 7 to 10 year payback on your system. So there's some good news, I think, with that. Right now with your mechanical systems, I think you're a bit on touch and go, and that's kind of what I've heard from your facility staff already, and it's difficult for us to predict, but from what at least we see, you know, we're not there testing and opening up the boiler and looking at it, but from our experience, we see that, you know, they're definitely clearly at the end of its useful life.
Do you know where the underground oil?
No, nobody was really sure, but we anticipated it's right under the putting green, or right just somewhere around the putting green.
Because it's close to the boiler and
It's close to the boiler, so it makes sense that it's entering out that same location. So there's potential of also doing a dual fuel type of boiler system in which you could really hedge on which is the best fuel, you know, commodity at the time. So that's what we recommend on facilities like this, is to go to a dual fuel source. And you have plenty of room to put a, you know, to hide a propane tank or such, because I'm not sure natural gas is.
There was mention in here just about, I might have just mentioned the smell of mold, I don't know, but the point is
Now,
one of those rooms, it was pointed out that a little worse than something else.
You know, I think you're dealing with you're dealing with a building that would, you know, you're not dealing with the same ventilation rates that we would have on a modern building, so the air changes is just not there. The building, the windows, some of them are operable, but I just think it's, you're not bringing in enough outside air, and you're not ventilating the space enough. You'll most likely find mold in areas and where we see roof, you know, we see some of those roof leaks. I think that's common, but we didn't get a sense that we didn't see anything that said we have a mold epidemic. We didn't see black mold growing up all the walls. But where there's a roof leak, you'll probably find some of that, but that's, you know, you could abate that pretty easily.
Is there anything over the winter that you see that we might be vulnerable?
Well, you know, your building's not, I think I understand that it's gonna remain dormant at this point in terms of its usage, so you need to keep the systems running. Yeah, don't mothball it. No, at this point, I think the winter, there's no immediate items that are there. If anything, be prepared, you know, the boiler may go down in the middle of a cold winter and you need to, you know, you're gonna need to do some repairs, but it's hard for us to predict. I surely wouldn't say you have to do anything today. Any other questions or comments?
For your very thorough and
Very
prompt
helpful, very helpful.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
needs
David.
assessment, consistent with your
Thank you
performance
very
for the
much.
town.
We
of
will,
Woodbridge.
please look at the reports that I handed to you tonight. I will do some minor tweaks and edits and get you, unless I hear anything in the next you tell me when, I'll issue you a final report for the record.
Good.
Okay?
Hey, so one
Thank you
more
very
question.
much.
You bet.
Just like from an architect's opinion, if the downstairs locker rooms, because they're in such great shape, would
The building was built for a specific programmatic need. Really hard to slice a portion off of it. If anything would be sliced off of it, it'd be the pro shop. That's probably the best. That was probably the only area that you could slice and move those amenities into your larger facility. So I think that's where it would be best suited. To try to divide this building any other way, it just was really designed for its specific use. It's not that easily adaptable.
Okay, thank you, David.
Have a good holiday.
Next item is a proposed amendment to the feature building committee chart. And in your packet, you'll see the amendment to the feature building infrastructure upgrade. And that is including the pool and locker rooms located in Beecher South. And we did that as a result of the capital budget hearings we had in connection with the pool, so this is to allow the feature building committee to also include the pool and locker rooms in their study. So I'd entertain a motion to approve that?
So moved.
I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How long will this push off the replacement of the lockers? Because I had heard from someone that they prefer to have it run now as opposed to putting it into this capital, into the whole feature renovation. And I noticed the issue, and the issue that when we discussed last week with the lockers, my concern is that a lot of the lockers that are in there are not safe. They're corroding, and they present a danger to people who use them.
Well, Greg is a member of this committee, so I assume that they're gonna give priority to anything that's of an immediate nature.
I mean, the main reason that we want to include the pool within the feature building committee scope is because of the mechanicals and there's a dehumidifier that's not been working for years. There's no dehumidification going on at all. And boilers that are really getting beyond their useful life. The lockers are a problem, and so they're part of this. The lockers are not nearly as expensive as the rest of this, and we may need to take some immediate action. I think one of the options is you take the doors off, even if it's your temporary fix, because the doors are what are jagged and dangerous. I think the total cost of locker replacement, as they are right now, might have been like 40,000. I'm trying to remember. It's like double if you go plastic, and
Right, and the conversation I had was that it doesn't have to be a one-to-one on the lockers. You could probably go with half the lockers that they have.
well, I think possibly if you go with half the lockers, you get into more of a retrofit issue. Like, you may not save as much money as you think, because then they don't fit in space, and you have to build out the space. So, I mean, we have to figure that out because it's a safety issue. And but our main reason for wanting to include that in the charge is that we were trying to tighten up the envelope on that building and make it more efficient. And that is a key part of the building that's not efficient. Those boilers are going 24/7, trying to keep the pool at 83 degrees, and you still can barely sort of keep it at that point. So the locker rooms are part of it.
All right, well, would there be any way to expedite making the lockers safe? Like you said, maybe if it's removing the doors on the ones that are sharp.
We're meeting every Friday morning, so I think if I bring that up this Friday, we can see what we can do about that.
Maybe come back in January with a recommendation.
Or say that it's been done.
ASAP, or, right, exactly.
Okay.
Something that
I
you can
think
do quickly.
this is a very good idea.
Yes.
Because
Right.
it's just efficient.
Right.
Use your resources that are in place, and it's
What
solid.
about something
makes
with
sense.
that I'm sorry, something
Shooting.
with that landscaping or as well, would that be worth it to turn over?
We talked about that, and it was a consensus that that would be more in their operating budget or,
Okay, I
ongoing
just,
there,
not to give
yeah,
you guys
that's
more work, but that also came
Right.
to us at the same
The
time.
erosion
Yeah.
control.
Exactly,
Right.
thank you, it's not really landscaping,
Something-
exactly,
right.
it's erosion control, thank you, Susan, yep.
so, any other comments?
Okay.
So, there's a motion on the table, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Passes unanimously.